Hello and a warm welcome to another edition of the Irish Angle on Jump To It. I'm joined as usual by Johnny Ward and Emma Nagle, and we're going to look at all the big stories from the last week. Lots to discuss this week, so we'll get stuck into it. Johnny, Emma, welcome to the show.
How are you getting
Thanks,
on,
Vincent.
Vinny? Good to be back.
Yeah, all good. The big thing, is from Nice yesterday. Jack Kennedy, who was walking away with the Jockeys Championship for the first time, 18 clear of Paul Townend, and then he takes a bad fall, and looks like he's broken his leg. He's fractured his left leg. He appeared in Nice this morning, I'm told, for a schooling session of Gordon Elliott horses. He got himself out of hospital there, but he's due to be back in hospital to see a doctor tomorrow to see about getting an operation on the leg. It's a desperate time for it to happen to him. It looks like he's going to be out for the remainder of the season. Emma, terrible news.
Yeah, I know you have to feel so sorry for Jack. Like, he was probably his best season so far numbers wise, and I think he was 17 in front of Paul Town and kind of looked nearly a really short price favourite to be champion jockey this year, and coming into Cheltenham as well. Like, he had a lot of exciting horses to look forward to. Oh God, like, you have to feel so sorry for him. Like, it's hard to believe that he's only, 23 years of age, and the record of injuries he has. Like, I mean, there's lads who are 40, 45 who haven't had half the amount of bone breaks that Jack has had. So, like, it's obviously a massive blow for him to take. And, like, looking forward now for the next few weeks, few months, who's Gordon Elliott going to use for his real top horses at Cheltenham? You know, it's kind of unlikely Jack will get back in time. What is it, about 8 weeks in Cheltenham now with a leg break? Like, it would have to take a very quick recovery. And, you know, will Gordon be looking at the likes of Jordan Gainfort and Dennis O'Regan, or will he have to draft kind of a more experienced, kind of higher profile jockey in? It's hard to know. But no, it's a massive blow for Jack. I think everyone was kind of sickened to see it happen. It was good to see. I saw a picture of him at Nace this morning, but yeah, I'm sure everyone, himself and Gordon, are all just heartbroken at because, you know, he's stayed fit for so long, and it's just a tough blow for him.
Yeah, it looked like the first time he was going to reach his full potential and be a champion jockey, because he certainly deserves it on what he's done so far. That's the 5th time he's broken a leg, which is unbelievable. Johnny, what do you think? Will Gordon stick with what he has, or will he look for someone else? Is there a chance that Brian Cooper could come in for a lot of these, because he rides a lot of the Gigginstown ones particularly, or possibly could Davy Russell come back?
Davy has to come back, hasn't he? You know, I wouldn't entirely rule it out. I think Davy could, if he were to come back, and I'm kind of presuming that he's in the shape to have 3 months more of it, considering that the timing at Thurles was kind of strange, really, for Davy to do that. But you'd imagine Gordon might have it in his head anyway. Just help me out here until the end of the season, and I think that'd be a great story. And the only happy aspect of a story that is just so frustrating from somebody just looking from afar, because I was on Racing TV on Friday evening and just discussing a couple of things, and one of the highlights for me, I mentioned Friday evening on recent times, was Jack Kennedy, the run that he's had. He's running away with the championship at the moment, obviously. He's had some big race winners, considering the injuries he's had, as Emma mentioned. I mean, I wouldn't have these injuries. Like, in what walk of life would somebody have at this age? And it didn't really seem to have a confidence, in the sense that he just literally got back on the horse time and time again. Really have to say I'm so sorry for him. I know that he'll come back from this, but it's to take in the sense of a young man who's done everything right and has had so much time to have to deal with this time and time again, mentally and physically, come back, miss out on winners, and then to show the class of the man, as you mentioned, to be watching horses this morning.
Yeah, must be desperately hard for him. And look, he's obviously made a sterner stuff than most of us, that he keeps bouncing back from this, but you would have to feel for him at the moment. And there's definitely going to be longer term implications through the rest of the season for all the Elliott horses. Moving on to a few other things, we also had a nice low-lying sun. Johnny, you're not too happy about that either. Fences and hurdles being omitted all the time.
No, but so I spoke to a couple of jockeys this morning, and Danny Mullins has a few suggestions in terms of what to do with it. Keith Donoghue has said that it's kind of become more of an issue in recent years. I don't really know why it's become such an issue, like almost all of a sudden. Maybe it's the fact that the sun might be shining more in winter these days. I don't know, but I've followed racing or so, and I never remember it being that much of an issue. Regardless of what, Vinny, this needs to change because, and I don't ride horses, and far be it from me to say that the jockeys should be jumping hurdles if there's a big shadow that the horses might jump in advance. And you're thinking of Annie Power at Cheltenham. I'm not saying that was anything to do with the shadow, but you're thinking of instances like that where the jockeys do feel it's unsafe. And I think some of the jockeys from yesteryear would maybe tell them to just kind of harden up a bit. But the problem as it is now is that we've had the biggest hurdle race over the 4 days at Leopardstown, the biggest Irish hurdle race over the entire Christmas season was the 2 mile senior race won by Stateman, which was a glorified bumper. And then you have a situation where Nace's big race of the year, just before the race, and you're building up to it, so much promotion goes into it, so much publicity, so much about the entries and who's going to run, and Nace trying to get people there. It's a glorified bumper. Jerry Hannon is saying, I think his comment was, we're coming to the second last with 3/4 of a mile to go. That's not a hurdles test. Like the test of good hurdlers, essentially, they're going to make mistakes when they come under pressure later in a race because the chips are down, they're under pressure, they're tiring a little bit, and they have to jump a hurdle at speed. And that's not the case now. And you have this unedifying scene of dolled off hurdles with horses just basically having to. It's like a schooling range. What the answer is, I'm not taking the judgment that just jump the bloody hurdle. It's not as simple as that. But David Jennings wrote a piece Friday in the rest of us where he said, well, run the bumper earlier in the card. I'm not sure what the suggestion is. This cannot go on. It's not a hurdle race, and you can't decide. It's like deciding the best kind of team in a football game now at half time. It doesn't work like that, and I think it's very disappointing.
Yeah, I wonder, should they look, if you can't see the hurdle, you can't jump the hurdle or the fence, in my opinion. I've no doubt about that you couldn't ask anybody to do that. So the alternative is you try and run the race when the sun isn't an issue. So could they run the racing a lot earlier? There's no reason why Nace couldn't have started, for argument's sake, at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. What do you think, Emma? Is that a solution? Just change the time of the races?
I suppose it kind of depends on how early they can predict. I don't know how easy it is to predict what time the sun will be lying low. But yeah, if they gave everyone enough notice, I don't think there'd be any problem with running a meeting early on a Sunday morning. Yeah, a few people may be suggesting to move around the times of the races. It's if you can tell maybe the day before that the sun will be low, but I don't know how easy that is to predict. I don't think on the day of the racing that you can move around the times of the cards is what some people were suggesting. I don't think that's possible because, horses arrive at a certain time to run at a certain time. They've been probably fasting for maybe a few hours before the race. So it just wouldn't suit people to change around the times of the racing while everyone has already arrived. And obviously the punters at the races as well would probably affect them. So it's definitely not something with an easy solution. It's very hard to know, like Johnny was saying, like this is kind of a new sensation, the whole low-lying sun. It kind of, probably in the last couple of years, really, it's kind of affecting a lot of the bigger races. A lot of the older generation, probably you'd hear them saying, back in my day, this you never heard and saw it happening. Why that was, whether the jockeys were just taking more of a chance, or whether it's something to do with the changing climate is, or just less of a cloud coverage in the winter these days. I'm not really sure, to be honest. Yeah, you can really understand the jockey's viewpoint. Obviously, it's very hard to know if a horse can see when you're judging the low-lying sun, because the horse has a totally different viewpoint to the jockey. Their eyes are at the side of their head rather than straight forward, so their view is a lot different to ours. But if a jockey can't see a fence, I think everyone has experienced it. Maybe driving down a small country road when the sun is lying low, it can be scary enough. So never mind approaching a hurdle at 30-40 miles an hour. It's a totally understandable thing. What the solution is, it's a very difficult one. There's definitely no easy solution. I think moving the races earlier on in the day, if they can predict it happening, is definitely something they could do. But how easy is it to predict that the weather will be like that during the day? The Irish weather forecast is probably anyone's guess a lot of the time, and having a race meeting at 9 o'clock on a Sunday probably going to affect the crowds massively, so it's not the ideal solution either. So yeah, there's definitely no easy answer, but you'd like to see something being done because it has, as Johnny said, it has a massive effect on two of the biggest races of later times in Ireland. And while I don't think it had too much of an effect on the result of the Lawlers, you would still like to see the excitement of them jumping the last hurdle.
Yeah, it's all about it's this short window in the season when the sun is low in the sky. Obviously, by the time we come around to Cheltenham, the sun is higher in the sky, so it shouldn't be an issue. But look, we already do this with racing in the summer. We race in the evening time because the sun is out, and in winter time we race much earlier because the sun goes in and it's dark and you can't race in the dark. So I don't see any reason why they couldn't race a little bit earlier. On certain days, if they know in advance, say you look at the longer term forecast and say, okay, it's looking like they can tell us all of the time with the 10-day forecast what the general weather is going to be like, the amount of rain we're going to get. I'm sure it's only a matter of talking to the Met Air and people and whoever else to see, look, what is the cloud cover likely to be like on a particular day. They could have announced it on Friday to say, look, declarations for Nace Sunday will now be, the racing will take place at an earlier stage. I wouldn't see it being a problem. Maybe it's only a matter of an hour earlier. It wouldn't even have to be necessarily 9 in.the morning. It could be 11 in.the morning. The meeting starts at, mightn't make a huge difference to everybody, but at least we'd get to see the proper horses run and jump all the obstacles, which is what we're all looking for here. Moving on, a couple of other things. Sorry, Johnny.
Be some start to a stag party when they brought the bags racing in like when you start at 8:30, and I've arranged stag starting in the winter in Gore. And imagine bringing lads in a stag and racing starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. Be some crack.
Perfect, absolutely perfect for them. Yeah, get them to bed early as well. Yeah, even better. So looking at a few other things, we had big racing in the UK as well at the weekend, the Tolworth Hurdle. A horse, Paul Nicholls again. He seems to be winning everything over there. You can't have a big Saturday race without Paul Nicholls winning it. And Tahur, how do I pronounce this? Tamuras won that. There was a couple of disappointments in it. The two other main fancies didn't run well, including Arctic Bresel of Henry de Bromhead's. That's a few flops in a row for Henry de Bromhead bringing horses over to the UK. Has he got an issue, Emma?
Yeah, you definitely have to worry about it because the last 3 horses he brought over was Aplutar, Envoy Allen, and now Arctic Bristle. They all kind of ran similar races. They all just faded out very tamely. I liked Arctic Bristle coming into the race. I thought he was very impressive when he won at Cork, and it was just really hard to see why he blew out so easily. He didn't look overly keen to me. He kind of was running in snatches a small bit. Maybe the ground, he didn't like it. It was very a real slog. Maybe that was it, but I wouldn't be making too many excuses for him apart from maybe something was amiss. Like the others that Henry has brought to England, you'd have to think. Look, the winner was impressive for Paul Nicholls, but I don't think it was an overly impressive race to watch. It turned into a real slog in the end, and he probably just seemed to like the mud more than anyone else did. There was kind of a few people knocking the champion bumper form last year. Authorised Speed was obviously fairly fancy coming into it. But I can't really see the winner getting involved in the Supreme. People are knocking Facile Vega now over the knock to the champion bumper form. But in my eyes, I think Facile Vega is definitely worthy of any price he is at Cheltenham now. He's been kind of foot perfect so far, and Marie National seems to be the only real contender to him in my eyes at the moment. I don't think Tolworth made much difference to that.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think I think the bookmakers are overreacting to a lot of the UK form. We're seeing horses win there, and they're tumbling in price for races in Cheltenham, including that Tolworth winner. For me, it doesn't look to be in the same class as what we're dealing with from here. So it'll be interesting to see where all that ends up in March. What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, briefly, just I'd agree with Emma. I mean, the rating that he had going into the race, the rating of the third, the fact that you take like the two most interesting horses really in the race, certainly apart from the winner, were obviously Henry's and the favourite, who both flopped, and even the form of Arctic Brazil was nicely boosted with Cadaharla winning, and I thought he was very good that day. He ran no sort of race whatsoever. If you're looking at Cheltenham, I think Ireland is really going to dominate this year, and maybe not so much the handicaps, and obviously Constitution Hill, who won the Tolworth last year, but I totally agree with Emma. You've Facile Vega, and the horse that's of interest to me, apart from him, is definitely Marine National. I think he's a lot of class and is learning on the job. The English novices for me, Nicky's Jetaway horse completely fluffed his lines the week before, so I can't see the Brits winning the Supreme anyway this year, and I definitely would have major reservations about that Tolworth form.
Yeah, one last thing regarding horses is Honeysuckle. They're talking about Irish Champion Hurdle, and then depending on that, to go for the Champion Hurdle in Cheltenham again for the third time, or not go to Cheltenham and just retire her. What do you think, Emma? Is that a good decision?
To be honest, I'm happy with that decision. I think going for the mares would be a step back for her. You know, she kind of came from the mares to become champion hurdle, and it would seem like she's stepping back again before she retired, which to me wouldn't make a whole pile of sense. Look, you could kind of see the argument for it when it was being made to bring her out in a win, but yeah, I think if she'd have to run a big race at Dublin, and then if she does, she'll go to Cheltenham with her hopes high. But to be honest, I think it's kind of hard to see her beating Stateman or Vauban at this stage. I thought they were both very impressive over Christmas, so she'll really have to be back to her A game. Look, I hope she is. To be brilliant to see her back, and you know, if she, I don't think she really has to beat them if she's kind of up there, you know, close up, kind of puts down a good battle. I think she'll probably head to Cheltenham. And she'd have to be back to her best to do that, I think, because I thought the two Willie Mullins horses were very impressive at Christmas. So, yeah, she'll have plenty in her hands to do that, I think.
Yeah, personally, I would have thought if she gets beaten in Leopardstown, she doesn't go to Cheltenham. And I think if she wins in Leopardstown, I think they'll retire her. I'd be shocked if they decided, if for argument's sake they do win in Leopardstown, I'd be very surprised if they go on to Cheltenham to take on Constitution Hill. I think that's a step too far for me anyway. Johnny, you can see her win in Leopardstown, I presume. Is she good enough to beat Stateman and Vauban if they all turn up?
Not. I'd probably have a third favourite of those three at the moment, to be honest. I think Vauban is very, very good, and I thought he's run in that glorified bumper at Leopardstown was hugely encouraging, considering the way the race panned out. From a sporting perspective, Honeysuckle's unbeaten record is gone, so I don't think there's anything major to be lost if she were to run in the champion hurdle. And I think this is a really, really nice idea that there'd be so much of a narrative around Rachel and Honeysuckle going to the race against Constitution Hill and Stateman, and it would be a real proper talking point on day one, a day that may well have 5 odds on favourites. Cheltenham itself shouldn't have 5 odds on favourites, really, not to mind the first day, and we need these kind of hook stories. But I tend to agree with you, Vinny. I think you put your neck on the line a bit, to be honest, earlier this year when you said I'd probably just retire her. She hasn't a prayer of beating Constitution Hill, and I thought you were a bit mad at the time, but now I kind of almost wish that happened, in the sense of she would have, like Feathered Lady, she would have gone to into the history book. She was never beaten. She was the amazing mare for a generation. But to be honest, I don't think she'll run at Cheltenham, and if you're asking me to price up Leopardstown, she's third favourite.
Yeah, I'd be somewhat in the same camp there. Looking at a few other big issues from last week, the main one being these yearling sales from last autumn. There's an issue there. A guy called Richard Knight, a relatively small-time bloodstock agent, went on a spending spree, spent over 20 million at 4 different sales last autumn. The main one being at the Tattersall's Book 1 sales, where he bought 16 individuals, including the highest price lot at 2 million guineas. He was also bought the most expensive lot at the Orby sale, full brother, is it, or full sister, sorry, to Blackbeard for 2.6 million euro. And all of a sudden, his sugar daddy backer hasn't come up with the money. So none of those horses have actually been sold now, and they're all due to be resold or try to get rid of them in some way. What you make of this, Emma? It's a mess, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a massive mess. I mean, you'd have to feel sorry for the vendors more than anyone of the horses that were sold, because, you know, they were counting their money, I suppose, when they went through the sales ring, and they haven't received it, obviously.
Well, in fairness, most of them have, as far as I know.
Oh, sorry, my mistake.
Tattersall's paid all their vendors, and as far as I know, Goffs did too. I'm not sure about Keeneland and Arcana, what's happening there, but certainly Tattersall's have paid all the vendors, so they've all got their money, which means Tattersall's is actually out of pocket here and is going to have to try and resell these horses.
Yeah, that's the massive risk that the sales companies take when they offer credit to an awful lot of buyers. You'd have to question what the kind of checking process is when they're offering this kind of credit. Obviously, the agent, it's kind of hard to blame him too much. I mean, he is buying on behalf of, I suppose, what he thought was a promise of the owner. Obviously promised that he could pay for these horses, so it's not really his obligation to make the payments go through. But yeah, I mean, you have to really question the sales companies, how they vet the credit terms for a lot of the customers, especially at this kind of money. You know, I think we were talking off air, and we were saying it was you made a very good point. If me or you were going up to the sales tomorrow, we only had 10 grand to spend. That's all we can spend. But some people can arrive at the sales and spend hundreds of thousands that isn't in their pocket at the time. So it's a big question on it, on the kind of whole integrity side of it. A lot of the time when sales credit is offered, it's kind of the sales companies are relying on the horses being resold to even get the money back, which is risky. It's a big risk that the sales companies take, and it backfired on them here. It's just, you wonder, will they maybe question their practices going forward? Will the credit terms offered be changed dramatically? Because I know in Ireland, especially the store sales, a lot of the horses will be bought on credit, and will they be considering that kind of thing, seeing how this turned out in the end? Because they are playing a very risky game, offering hundreds of thousands of credit often, and there's no guarantee that they'll ever get that money back. As we've seen here, they have to sell the horses again.
Yeah, and this is the big thing around the sales side of the industry. It's not a level playing field. As we said off air, saying if I went to Tattersall's, Goffs or whatever next week to buy some horse, say a store horse I want to buy, and I've got 50 grand saved up, bring the 50 grand cash with me, and I'm trying to bid against people who have no money in their pocket and can outbid me on every single lot that comes up because they've got credit with them, and the credit is that they buy 6 or 7 or 8 or 10, whatever number of stores they buy, they bring them home, and then they guarantee to bring them back to a future sale when they'll sell them again. So Tattersall's, Goffs and the rest of them, they all allow them this credit to bring them back, and then they pay up at the end when they've brought them back and resold them. It's very unfair for an individual who comes along and hasn't got the clout within the industry to try and compete against that. And obviously in this particular case, Richard Knight had an open checkbook here. He could just keep bidding as far as he wanted with every horse. So that's why he got some of those top lots and outbid the likes of Coolmore and the Sheiks and everything else in buying these. So it's a very difficult situation, isn't it? What do you think, Johnny?
Sorry, Vinny, I just lost it in there. First of all, the 50 grand you're going to spend, I think it's worked out well for you, because you can definitely spend it on something better than the procurement of a horse. But this is a fascinating story, and it has to do with, there are a lot of aspects to it. This guy obviously comes from money in Kuwait, and essentially the oil money in the Arab world has kind of propped up the flat game in Ireland to a large extent, or the flat game in Europe to a large extent, where you hear Charlie Fellows today was the underbidder on a horse by Kingman. I think they were talking of spending around $750,000 on, and he was the underbidder to this chap, and he was saying, like, I can't go into a bidding war with Coolmore and Godolphin, but I had a chance here. But this is to do with, I believe, my understanding is the taps were turned off back in Kuwait on the money that he was spending. He essentially is there, but he doesn't have access to it at the moment. But there's another aspect to this, and I think, and I stand corrected on this, but I think Keeneland will give you 2 weeks grace on a bill, whereas over here, and in fairness now, I think this is fairly widespread. They give you a long time to pay your bill. The companies over here decided that, even though, and this is my understanding, even though he had failed to pay the bill at Keeneland the 2 weeks later, and that raised a massive red flag, I think they weren't going to change the sort of MO over here, and we're now left with this mess where I would feel sympathy for the underbidders at times, but when you look at the obscene amounts of money involved, this is basically oil wealth from Kuwait. When you look at the obscene amount of money involved, it does kind of shine a light on how this whole industry is kind of based on literally a house built on sand, and that this money just was turned off, and these grossly inflated fees were basically will never transpire because the guy driving it can't pay the bill.
Yeah. Well, another thing, we're not going to solve or sort that one out, but the other one here is, as well as those record figures that there were at all the sales last year, which now are in serious doubt, so that's a downer for the industry as a whole. We also have attendances in the UK. Racing Post had a piece on this last week. It looks like the total attendance for 2022 in the UK is going to drop below 5 million for the first time, excluding, of course, the COVID years. But prior to that, there's never been a year when there's been less than 5 million people have attended racing. we're now looking at they reckon there could be a 13% drop from the 2019 numbers. Ireland is looking at somewhere around a 7% drop. Our figures in 2019 were 1.31 million. Big issue for racing going forward. It's classed as being the second highest attended sport in the UK. Down below 5 million is beginning to become a worry, isn't it? Emma, what would you think about that? Is it a long-term problem we've got, or is this a blip after COVID?
To be honest, I don't think in Ireland it's probably not too much of a problem. I think the attendance at Leopardstown over Christmas was quite strong. I think the figures in Limerick were down a bit, but the figures that were they were down a good bit. Sorry, the figures put up previously were probably well overinflated by the looks of things, because I wasn't at Limerick myself, but I've heard that the crowds kind of seem strong enough the whole way through, so you'd have to question the figures that were put forward in the previous years rather so than saying that it was down too much this year. In England, definitely, I think the sport is probably in a bit more trouble attendance figures wise. Look, you'd have to take into account the probably effect of the cost of living crisis. People are finding it hard to go to anywhere, never mind go racing, and racing in England especially seems like a very expensive day out. Like I don't go racing in England too often myself. I was at the festival last time I was over there, but it's a massively expensive day out. Like going to Cheltenham for the week or even for a few days will cost you like a lot of money. Like you might as well go on a foreign holiday for that kind of money and watch it over there. Whereas in Ireland it's not a cheap day out. It's a lot more affordable. And in Ireland, I think they kind of realise that you have to offer value for money, and we've seen, especially this season, there's been a lot of even free cards. Bar One Racing sponsored a lot of cards and let people in for free. I think Punchestown was free on New Year's Eve. So I think Irish racing is probably thinking more about the punter in that regard. It's probably something that England need to be concentrating on more, offering value for money once you get in the gate, and even before you get in the gate. Some of the cost of entry in England is absolutely crazy when you look at it. I see a lot of people on Twitter debating now they're going to go to Dublin Racing Festival rather than even going to Cheltenham at all, because it just seems much better value even flying over on hotels wise, that you'd save thousands of pounds probably going to Dublin Racing Festival, and you'll probably get just as good quality over the 2 days. So yeah, it's definitely a worry. I think more so in England than Ireland. I think Ireland is probably going to be okay long run. It's probably more of an affiliation to the sport around the country, whereas in England it's probably there's a lot more doubters to racing, a lot more begrudgers, I suppose. Whereas in Ireland it's probably a bit more ingrained into the culture in general.
And one thing, talking about attendances and crowds, I got caught out here living in the Curragh. I drove into Kildare town on the bank holiday Monday and got caught up in the traffic to Kildare Village shopping outlet. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen traffic like it in my life. You wouldn't see it at the Galway Festival. And this was people who had probably shopped till they dropped prior to Christmas, and yet there they are. They're back again as soon as the new year comes with the sales on. They're in again, and it's hard to know. You talk about people haven't got money. Yes, they have. They've got it to spend there, and it's not a cheap place to buy anything. Even though they tell you there's money off. It's like what you could buy a knife in there, a kitchen knife for about 300 quid. Like it's madness. Anyway, we'll get off that for a moment. Johnny, give me a horse from last week that you think is worth following going forward.
I had a great spiel lined up there on that issue, Vinny. Have we run out of time?
No, go on. Give it to me if you have it.
Well, funny. I was going down to Kerry, was it on last week anyway, and exactly what you're saying, the queue for Kildare Village. But very briefly, Vinny, horse race in Ireland counts the jockeys with their AIR card as the attendance. So that'd be like back in the day in the League of Ireland when you'd have a first division game, they'd just put down 100 as the attendance. That'd be like counting the players, the management, the physios, everything, the referees. So the figures for me, you look at some of the meetings down the years, and you're like, there was no way there were that many people at it. And if you count the amount of people actually paying into these meetings, it's tiny. But there's a couple of things here. First of all, the race courses are built on media rights money. They really don't really care that much anymore about people coming in. And secondly, and this is a problem for all the tracks, it's very, very hard to, it's not for me a price thing. It's very hard to spend 4 or 5 days excluding traffic at a race meeting with not that much going on. When, as during COVID, everyone learned to just watch it at home, and it's a hard sell. It's a hard sell every day of the week, apart from the festivals, because it's just, there isn't that much going on. It's a long, long day at the races. You can watch it at home. You can probably get a better bet with all the bookies at home. So I think attendance is going to be a massive problem going forward. People's attention span has gone down as well. So like having a sport where only sometimes 5 or 10% of the actual day is spent watching sport is difficult. And, you know, there's no atmosphere at a lot of meetings either. So what's the actual draw on going to the meeting? The betting ring is dead. So I don't know, like I wouldn't necessarily blame the authorities, but crowds are going to be a major problem going forward, maybe apart from festivals. As for a horse to follow, at Dundalk, which is a place, funny enough, I really enjoy going to, even though very few people go there, Power Drive. A lot of Simpsons fans will remember the episode with the golf Power Drive. So I'm going to go with Power Drive. The Flynn team in great form, and he ran a lovely race from the front on Friday. He's coming back to win in Mark. He was thriving this time last year, and should win or go very close the next twice.
Very good. Just on that last thing on attendances is that the fact you talk about people watching it on TV, but those people are already converted to the sport. They've gone racing, I'm presuming the vast majority have gone racing over the years, and now they don't go and they watch it on TV, which I have to put my hand up. I'm one of them, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you get a new audience in if you can't get them to the races in the first place? How do they become fans on TV? That's the big issue going forward. I think you really need to get bums on seats at the track at some point in the season to get people to then become fans of it and watch it on TV. But anyway, Emma, you have a horse. Have you from the last week that you think will win going forward?
Yeah, I was actually in Liverpool all weekend, so I didn't get to see all the races over the weekend. But
you and Fran Berry, Emma, both at Anfield, I believe.
No, I actually didn't see him. I saw his Instagram afterwards, all right, but he must have been the other side to me. But no, I saw the big races, and I thought Irish Point in the Lawlers, I think he ran a massive race. Look, I think Cham Kiley's a very good horse, but he needs to get his own way in front, and he got that. I think that Danny gave him a brilliant ride, and I think probably Irish Point coming into the Ballymore will probably be a really solid bet. I think is he around 14-1, 12-14-1, around that kind of price, which I think is a big price for him because, you know, he's a horse who always seems to win his race. He ran a massive race against Marine National in the Royal Bond, just got pipped that day. Thought he ran another solid race behind Cham Kiley, who got his own way. Without the hurdles wouldn't have helped Irish Point's cause either, I don't think. So I think in the Ballymore, which is probably a wide open race, he's probably one that I'd be looking forward to seeing. Gordon thinks a lot of him, and he's probably just a more of a solid bet than Cham Kiley, for me anyway. So yeah, he's a horse that I'd be watching as well going forward.
Yeah, interesting horse. I liked him in Fairyhouse. Now, he was well beaten in the finish by Marine National. If Marine National had jumped the last, would have won easy, I think, that day, but it was still a good performance. Looking at it from my point of view, there's one that Johnny mentioned previously to us that had finished strongly in a maiden, Cotta Horla. JP McManus owned horse that was strongly backed on Sunday to win a handicap hurdle off a mark of 109. I think that'll win again. I think it'll win again and probably again. Didn't really jump that well. It was in an opportunity race. Didn't jump that well. Made a mistake at the last, but still different class to the opposition. I think there's definitely a future in that horse. Look, guys, thanks for all the chat and all the discussion about everything. And we'll be back this time next week again, next Monday for another show. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all soon. Bye for now.